There is a kind of quiet that does not mean peace. It is not the quiet of someone who has moved on. It is the quiet of someone carrying more than they know how to say. You have seen it before. A friend who used to call every week now sends short text. A partner who once shared everything now answers in one word. A family member who used to laugh freely now sits in silence at gatherings. At first it is confusing. Nothing dramatic happened. No fight, no explosion, no clear reason for the distance. And that is where most people get it wrong. They assume the silence means everything is fine, that the person is just busy, that they need space, that they will come around eventually. But silence is not always the absence of something. Sometimes it is the presence of something that has nowhere to go. People who go quiet when they are hurt are not empty inside. They are flooded with disappointment, flooded with thoughts they cannot untangle, flooded with feelings that feel too complicated to explain. And instead of letting that flood spill outward, they build a dam inside themselves. From the outside, it looks like distance. From the inside, it feels like survival. This video is for the people who have been called hard to reach, too quiet, too closed off, the people who feel everything and say almost nothing, the people who wish they could explain what is happening inside them, but somehow the words never come out the way they need them to. Because the truth is, going quiet was never really about not caring, and that is where our story begins. Psychologists have a name for this pattern. It is called emotional withdrawal. It happens when the mind decides that expressing pain is either too dangerous or completely useless. But here is what most people do not understand. This does not begin in adulthood. It is built, slowly, quietly, over years. Imagine growing up in a house where your feelings were never really welcomed. You cried and no one came. You spoke up and you were dismissed. You tried to explain and you were told you were too sensitive. After enough of that, your brain does something quiet but powerful. It decides, speaking does not help. Silence keeps me safe. This creates a certain kind of person. Someone who notices everything but shares almost nothing. Someone who carries the weight of every unspoken word. Someone who looks calm on the outside, while a storm rages on the inside. What makes this difficult to see is that the silence does not happen all at once. It happens in stages. First, they try. They say something. They hint. They hope you will notice. When that does not work, they try again, but with less energy, less hope, fewer words. Then at some point, they stop trying altogether. The hope that things will change begins to fade, and eventually, silence feels easier than one more disappointment. To everyone else, it looks sudden. Where did they go? But to the quiet person, it was a long, slow walk, step by step, disappointment by disappointment. And this is what people miss. Silence is not the lack of feeling. It is the build-up of it. Every time they were ignored. Every time they opened up and regretted it. Every time they chose peace over being heard. It all collects inside them, like water behind a dam, and that silence becomes their only language. It feels safer than trying to explain something that nobody seems to understand. But here is the trap. The same quiet that protects them also cuts them off. People around them start making up stories. They do not care anymore. They have changed. They are pulling away on purpose. And none of that is true. But the quiet person does not correct them. Because correcting means explaining. And explaining has never worked before. So the distance grows. And the quiet person watches it happen. Helpless, tired, and too overwhelmed to reach across the gap. But the story does not end there, because sometimes the silence is not about avoiding conflict. It is about keeping what little dignity they have left. There is a kind of pain that feels too personal to share, too messy to put into words, too easy for someone else to misunderstand or minimize. So instead of trying to translate it, they hold it close. They protect it. They keep it where no one can twist it or dismiss it. But here is the problem. The same wall that keeps pain out also keeps connection out. And no one can heal a wound they are not allowed to see. Which brings us to an obvious question. If staying silent creates so much distance, why do people keep doing it? Why not just say what is wrong? You might be asking, why do they not just speak up? Why not use their words? The answer is not simple. This is rarely about one moment. It is about every moment that came before it. Every time they spoke and no one listened. Every time they opened their heart and regretted it. Those memories do not disappear. They become the lens through which future hurt is seen. So when pain happens again, the response is not only about what just happened, it carries the weight of everything that happened before. Old disappointments, old wounds, old moments that taught them it was safer to stay quiet. And over time, silence starts to feel like the safest option. Not all quiet is the same. There is a difference between the silence of someone who is at peace and the silence of someone who is in pain. One feels light, the other feels heavy. You can feel the difference if you pay attention. A text that used to be paragraphs becomes one sentence. A voice that used to be warm becomes flat. A presence that used to fill the room becomes barely there. But most people miss these signs. They're waiting for something loud, something obvious, something impossible to ignore. The truth is that hurt rarely announces itself that way. More often it withdraws. It becomes quieter, smaller, harder to reach. And by the time people finally notice the silence, the person inside it has usually been hurting for much longer than anyone realized. There is a moment, a quiet, critical moment, where everything either breaks or begins to heal. And it is not when they go silent, it is what happens after. Because silence over time starts to ask a question. Not out loud, not dramatically, just quietly. Is anyone going to notice? The answer to that question changes everything. There is something almost invisible about the moment a quiet person stops hoping. No announcement, no final message, no dramatic exit. Just a soft, quiet letting go. Even in their silence, there was still a thread of hope. Hope that someone would see the small changes. Hope that someone would ask the right question. Hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would understand without being told. But when that hope finally fades, the silence changes. It is no longer protection. It becomes distance. What makes this so unfair is that by the time someone finally notices something is wrong, the quiet person has already carried most of it alone. They have replayed conversations, questioned themselves, tried to see the other person's side. They have spent weeks, sometimes months, making sense of a hurt nobody else even knew existed. All of it happened inside. All of it happened silently. So when someone finally asks, "Why didn't you tell me?" the question lands differently than they expect. Because in the quiet person's mind, they already tried. And when those attempts went unnoticed, they stopped making them. This is how relationships fade, not with a bang, with 1,000 small misses. Moments where a little more attention could have changed everything. Moments where listening, not fixing, was all that was needed. Moments where someone simply needed to feel seen. And sometimes those moments reveal something people rarely talk about. Because when someone does notice, when someone leans in gently instead of pulling away, when someone says, "You seem different. I am here if you want to talk," without pressure, it creates something rare. Is safety. And safety is the one thing that can slowly open a quiet person back up. But it has to be real. If you see yourself in this, if you're someone who goes quiet when you're hurt, then perhaps the most important thing to remember is that protection and healing are not the same thing. The silence may have protected you. It may have helped you survive moments that felt too painful, too complicated, or too lonely to explain. But healing asks for something different. Not all at once, not with everyone, not through some dramatic act of vulnerability. Just one small step beyond the silence. one honest sentence, one moment of letting another person see what is happening underneath. Because connection rarely begins with being fully understood. It begins with being willing to be seen. And sometimes the people who seem hardest to reach are simply the people who have spent the longest time carrying everything alone. I hope you find a moment of peace today.